Yeah. Next, we want to move into the panel session. So I invite our panel's speakers, Uriah Burkinell from EMED, Dale Meredith from Pluralsight, Chad Dam, UND, William Cromati, Kirkwall, Andrew Ginter, Waterfall Security, William Swerson from Northrop Grumman. If you could please come forward, I would appreciate it. And this panel is actually moderated by myself and Professor Hassan Reza. And Professor Ronald Marsh is sick, supposed to be also joining us, but unfortunately he couldn't. But the title of the panel is actually Emerging Cyber Threats and Solutions. So we have a great combination of panel members here, and from wide variety of industries. And so it'd be nice to have a more interactive dialogue with them, rather than, of course, we're going to ask some questions at the same time. We also welcome questions from audience, as we do that. Professor Hassan Reza, you want to come forward and maybe we can ask questions. So the first thing, maybe what we should do is maybe why don't you guys introduce yourself, who you are, what organization you represent, and maybe, what cybersecurity means to you,
I'm Batman. Dale Meredith, cybersecurity author, trainer, work with Pluralsight, as well as EC Council.
Will Swerson, Northrop Grumman. I do advanced design and research for our site.
Chad Dam, information security officer here at the University of North Dakota. I've been here for about 13 years.
Will Cromarty, CEO and founder of Kirkwall. At Kirkwall, we're focused on defending autonomous systems from critical failure. So we do that for drones, we do that for ag tech, and we do that for industrial control. Really, that just means we keep robots on good behavior.
Andrew Ginter with Waterfall Security. Waterfall works in the OT space, in the industrial control system space. We work with what are arguably the world's most secure industrial sites. I'll use the opportunity to say a word about perspective on security. A lot of people are focused on protecting the information. They're focused on privacy. A lot of people ask, is the cloud, is the industrial internet, is the Internet of Things going to keep my data safe? I look at the other side of the coin. Waterfall looks at the other side of the coin. We're focused on preventing sabotage of physical operations rather than protecting the information.
My name is Uriah Burkinell. I am with EMED Digital Healthcare. We do telehealth and programming services for virtual labs. Prior to that, I was with the state of North Dakota as the GRC manager and built that program there.
Now I'd like to ask Professor Hassan to say a few words introducing him.
First, let me introduce myself. My name is Hassan Reza. I'm faculty member with the School of Engineering and Computer Science. My area is software engineering, software design, and to some degree, safety and security engineering. So I like to ask questions about everybody on the panel. What is your emphasis when we talk about security? Is it on detection, prevention, or mitigation? Which one is your number one priority?
Maybe we can go from Dale.
Yeah.
I would say for me, it's prevention, just in the aspect of kind of going back to what I talked about earlier, that we've exposed so much already. We have to really be on our toes as far as, I look at it from a personal perspective versus a business. I think a business still needs to be there for to protect themselves as well. But I kind of look at it from that aspect. It's a struggle that we're going to continue to have. It's job security, for us security professionals.
I guess so for me, I do more hardware than anything, but what I am more concerned about or mostly concerned about is the vulnerabilities in the system that I'm working on or designing. So, you know, having a group of individuals that are there to test, you know, what I'm doing and making sure that it's not vulnerable and the information that we have going, you know, between our machines and stuff like that is not compromised, you know, and taken and used against us. So.
My focus here at the university, I try to focus more on prevention just because of the type of data that we tend to work with on a daily basis. So I want to ensure that that is protected. So we're good stewards of everybody's information that's here, whether it's private or any kind of restricted data. Another focus in prevention is actually trying to make people more aware. What do you need to know? What do you need to take care of even in your personal lives? And if I can manage to do that here on this campus, then I hope everyone's life is improved, especially when it comes to cybersecurity.
So for us at Kirkwall, we're focused on prevention, but actually doing that through detection and focusing on how we can perfect that art of detecting that something's going wrong. So for us, we're doing that by building out a machine learning model that determines what normal looks like for any kind of robotic or industrial system, and basically taking that so that you can determine, you know, if I get a command that says open every single valve at once, or it says take this drone and make one of those rotors start spinning like crazy, you know, at a different RPM than the others, determining, okay, that's not a normal command. There's no time you really should do that to this system. And that's outside the baseline behavior for whatever industrial system you're working with.
Andrew Ginter, Waterfall, protection definitely, but bear with me for just a second. Imagine we're taking a tour of a power plant. A stranger runs in, no name badge, pulls the operator out of their chair, sits down in front of the keyboard and mouse, starts moving the keyboard and mouse. What happens? Chaos. Okay, every able-bodied individual in the place jumps on the intruder, drags them away from the, you know, screaming for security the whole time. The operator goes back in their chair. The supervisors look over their shoulder, trying to figure out what damage has been done. Do we have to trip the plant? Do we have to trip the generating unit? Minutes go by, tens of minutes. Okay, things settle down. We figure out that there was no damage done. You know, the tour is canceled. My tour guide comes back and says, sorry, you had to do that. Let's take you back to security. And I put my hand up. I say, excuse me. A question about what we just saw here. How long is an acceptable time to leave that intruder at that control station? The whole room goes silent. Every eye turns to me. Andrew, it's entirely the wrong question. The right question is, how did that person get in here? And what are we going to do to make sure this never happens again? So any amount of time on a critical system is unacceptable. But I said there's a but. But what happened when that intruder came in there? There were security guards. There was a detection system. Okay. Everybody in the room started screaming for security. Security came in there. It is, you know, it makes no sense to operate an asset like that without a detect, respond, and recover capability. So we're focused on protect, but don't get me wrong. You need the whole thing.
Yeah, for us, it's definitely making informed decisions. And that's really my responsibility. So what you'll see in a lot of these conversations, you know, just like you both talked about, you know, things start spinning, people start going into chairs they're not supposed to be in. And the question becomes, is there a reason for that, right? If you can take a look at the actual risk and make informed decisions and help the business decide on how to move forward correctly and operate. So much has been done in the past to do what we call FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's because that helps drive security, but it doesn't help drive it necessarily in a healthy way. So as we look to have this culture of security, it's really taking and saying, hey, we know you want to do this. And so many people would say, no, just don't do that thing, right? You guys shouldn't be going into this aspect of the market. You shouldn't be going here. You shouldn't be going there. And that's easy, right? Then you're safe. You're 100% safe. because you're not doing that thing. But is that what drives and creates better business? It's not. So the question is how do we have them do that safely? So our focus really is on helping them enable the business to do what they need to do. It's not unlike having kids, right? There's definitely those parents out there who will say, hey, don't go to the swimming pool, right? Don't do that. But is that good for kid, right? Should they be learning to swim? Is that how you make sure they don't drown? Is it putting on a life vest? Things like that. So we don't always want to say no, but we want to say yes for the right reasons and in the right way.
I think we've seen a really big paradigm shift. Before, years ago, we had to struggle to get budgets for IT departments, right? And the transition or the paradigm shift has now been every company is a technology company. Domino's is a technology company. And because of that, what I go back to the aspect of the weakest link in any security is the user. And I see a big transition and hopefully more and more companies jump on board with more education to the users, because it doesn't matter what hardware you put in place, what software you put into place. It just takes one user to ruin your day or your weekend. So I really think as far as awareness is concerned, is it's just continually driving, and especially for the next generation to grow up in an environment where they're more aware of what the potential is as far as, you know, getting hacked themselves or giving up too much information or jeopardizing a company and its resources.
Thanks for me. Working in the defense industry, you know, there's obvious reasons why we want to keep our data secured. So when I am talking to engineers, when I'm talking to business, the business folks, or a number of other individuals, this is obviously, you know, on the top of our mind. So in some way easy for me because, you know, there's really not a lot of discussion about whether or not we have to do this. We know that we have to do this. So when we design things and, you know, again, we try to develop them. So once they do go out into the field, we've looked for as many vulnerabilities as we possibly could. This thing has to go out, whatever it may be, and it has to work. You know, it has to work 100% of the time and stuff. So you working in that type of environment, I'm not so much concerned really about the awareness. The awareness is there for us, which is easy. So it's just making sure that, you know, we're really preparing for, you know, what's coming down the pipeline, you know, what's going to happen in 20 years, who are going to be like, what kind of new technologies are going to be emerging and stuff. So, yeah.
Well, obviously here at the university, and you'll probably hear me say that a lot with here at the university, but we actually interact with a wide range of individuals. You have students that from grade school have actually been told over and over again, watch what you're posting online, watch who you interact with, who you talk to, what information you provide. So by the time they get into college, it's more of trying to focus on what haven't you been told? Where are the gaps? What do we have to kind of get you to where you feel comfortable that if you are in a situation where something like that happens, that you actually have that ability to just kind of take a step back, take a breath, and actually try and focus on what you need to take care of instead of going into the chaos like somebody spoke earlier. As you're talking to faculty members and staff members here on campus, it's figuring out exactly what is their exposure, how much do they know, what are their gaps you have to figure out, and what's the best method out there that you can actually give them in order so that way they're as prepared. Also because, I mean, growing up, with some of them, they've been in the university for 20 to 40 years. So it's kind of trying to figure out that best method in order to assist them in learning.
So we had an interesting experience on this topic. We went through the National Science Foundation's I-Corps program in the first cohort from the Great Plains Hub. So we partnered with UND and NDSU on that, and we were kind of the guinea pigs for the program. And we did that probably 9 months ago or so, and it actually completely changed our business model because we would go and do these customer interviews, and we'd meet with agricultural companies or drone companies. And we'd ask them about, their cybersecurity posture. And we came in very narrowly focused purely just on cybersecurity for autonomous systems. That's all we want to do. And what we found was they would tell us, there are about 20 reasons that this machine might catch on fire. And cybersecurity is one of them. And I want to know all the others too. And so, they said, yes, my CEO said we need to care about cybersecurity. We were told change our passwords every 90 days. That's probably good enough, right? And that's kind of their cyber posture. But they've said we actually have an interest in lumping in that cyber element into industrial monitoring and kind of treating those as in the same of, is anything going wrong with my systems today? And whether that's because it's intentional sabotage or just because someone tripped over a power cable and unplugged it. And so for us, we focused on what does normal look like for any of these systems. And ultimately, we've ended up getting more traction as a company because we focused on that holistic monitoring of anything going wrong in any kind of abnormal sense that can include cyber. But what they told us there was, you can tell me 2 weeks later that it was a cyber incident as long as you stop it and my machine doesn't catch on fire today. That's the important part to me.
In the industrial world, it varies enormously by industry and by actor, owner, and operator within the industry. Concrete example. We've been talking about industrial cybersecurity since roughly 2003. Before that, there was, maybe a dozen academics in the world who were interested in the topic. After that, hundreds, now thousands and tens of thousands of practitioners in the space. So we've been talking about this for 20 years, and it was about 4 years ago. Now, passenger rails is all about engineering. It's all about safety. Okay. The sense I had, and, I paraphrase, the sense I had for, the passenger rail industry 4 years ago, they were heads down going safety, 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 safety. And it's as if 4 years ago, they looked up and they went, oh, shoot, cyber. We have to do that too, don't we? And to their credit, the industry is now taking steps. There are standards, there are working groups, there's progress, remarkable progress in 4 years. Entire industries were and are still blind to the problem. Concrete example, building automation. How many skyscrapers are there on the planet? How many of them have good cybersecurity programs? This is bad news waiting to happen. So no, awareness to me is still a very big deal in the industrial space.
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting when we talk about awareness. And for those of you who are students, as you get out into the workforce, and we all experience it once a year, we get this awareness training that we all have to go through because somebody at the federal level says, hey, you got to do this. And somebody like me writes a policy saying, hey, you all got to do this. It still horrifies me to this day because as a professional out there, I'm going to go through and click the wrong button. I'm going to fail this test and just look like a fool. Hasn't happened yet, luckily. But keeping in mind, and I think Chad probably said it well, especially as generations are coming up, it's just ingrained in everything and what everybody does. And I think that is really not only where it starts, but if you have an enthusiasm for it, teaching people things and asking them to take tests and have them remember things is an easy checkbox, but it's not always right. And sometimes it's about taking that passion and instilling it in others. One example that I do have is when I was doing third-party risk assessment, which is where we go out to our partners and say, hey, answer this questionnaire, we're going to evaluate you because we think you're probably going to pose a risk to us. And I was with an organization and we found such a risk. And these folks really, really scared me, especially with the type of work they were doing and information they had access to. I'm like, this isn't good. And so we started having these conversations and said, hey, you got to start fixing this stuff. Something fell under the rug somewhere. And they just kind of refused. We had these fights and these battles. And they just got nasty about it and really didn't want to fix the problems that they had. But we continue to have these meetings and continue to talk. And what we ended up doing from an awareness standpoint that nobody ever thinks of is we got them excited about securing this stuff. I mean, really, truly got them excited about it. And so they started doing things and they came back to us and said, hey, what if we did this? I'm like, boy, that's more than I ever would have asked of you. Very cool. Please definitely do that. And that's true before I left. So probably a few weeks ago, I was chatting with some folks who were still with the organization that I was with at that time. I said, so how did things go with those guys? And they go, you're right, believe it. They did a whole 180. They're actually asking us to do this other stuff and help drive the customer that we have in common between us to, actually do more and pay more to secure it better. And I'm just like, that's awesome. And that is the epitome of what we do. Everybody at this table, and obviously all the folks here, have that passion. And if you start to still that somewhere, more than training somebody, right? That teaches them, that makes them want to do the right thing.
Okay. Ransomware is a serious issue in defense, in finance, and in medicine. And, it impacts everybody, individual, but more so corporate and big industry. What are your strategy or what do you recommend to reduce the chance of getting hit by the ransom?
Get rid of your users. I'm kidding. So, well, it's a difficult one because attackers are getting more and more clever, and I think we're going to see a lot more coming at us with Gen AI.
Yes. Oh, let me be more specific. I'm talking about user. I mean, in terms of education, of all this is, cybersecurity awareness. What kind of motivation or recommendation you provide for the user in your organization to be educated in regard to how to deal with the ransom or prevent, this kind of attack?
Yeah, again, I think that might be the motivation of an attacker is always higher or more intense than people trying to defend, because they have more targets, more opportunities. And I don't know if you're going to be able to stop ransomware. As far as ransomware is concerned, we know there's all the different backups and different services that we can use to make sure that when we get hit, it's not a matter if, it's going to be when we get hit, that we have those things in play. But as far as continual training and making sure that the users are up to date, when we see things, when I read something about the latest exploit or vulnerability, I think it's so important that we immediately push to our users. I mean, within the hour, so that they don't become a victim, or they don't make us a victim of a 0-day type environment. I think so many times we see these different attacks come out, different ways that they're implementing ransomware. And as IT folks, we're just like, oh yeah, that's really cool. Never thought of that, but we forget to, again, get the information out quickly enough. I think it's very, very imperative to do that. Other than that, man, I'm excited to hear what everybody else has to say on the panel, because I'm at a loss.
Sort of the same. I mean, for where I work, they are pretty good about drilling it into our head. We receive notifications, 3 times a week with emails or PDFs that are talking about the latest threat, what's going on in the world and stuff. I mean, so we have a very, they try to get us to pay attention. We're all aware of what's at stake, especially with what we do, if there is a breach. However, I mean, again, your user is going to be probably the person that breaks it all down. So for us, it's a lot of training and just drilling it into your head and testing you and doing it over and over and over again, and adding multiple layers of protection and stuff. It's not a foolproof way, but it's something, I suppose. Yeah, so I will say, like, you know, from my standpoint, where I work, they do a great job at letting us know what to be aware of. You know, it's a lot. It can be a lot to read and everything, but you know, the frequent conversations that we have with our security and, you know, the face-to-face conversations, you know, the PDFs, that the posters, everything that gets put up, you see it continuously. You know, where I work, about how important it is to be or to remain vigilant, especially with ransomware and such.
Some things that I like to tell people is the basics are the basics for a reason. Keep your operating system up to date. Any software that you're using, that will kind of help to patch any holes the ransomware can exploit. If you get a lot of emails from random people, take the time to review everything, question it. Don't just accept that it's coming from a trusted source, not coming from your grandmother. It's not coming from your boss. Take that time, because that could have something that could trip the ransomware off and get going. Obviously, like with everybody, when they talk about ransomware, is to have a good backup strategy. Make sure you have backups of your backups of backups. That way, if they do happen to go through that event, you can recover faster. Another thing, especially in your personal lives, that you can look at and kind of do is any of your really important data that you're afraid of losing that can't be replaced, look into like a good encryption tool, because if the data is encrypted, it can't be encrypted again. So if you have any files, pictures that you don't want to lose, kind of research into that so that way that can assist you. But just being vigilant, keeping your head on a swivel, just kind of making sure that you know what to look out for.
Yeah, I think this one is tough. You know, you can have the best security in the world, but if someone plugs in a flash drive they found in the parking lot, then that's all out the window pretty quickly. So it's a lot of it being cultural. We've had some success kind of instilling that culture through red team style exercises. So having people get the opportunity to be the bad guy and to think about, how would I target my own company, right? How would I intentionally try and attack our systems? We led the cyber and ag session, so focused on agriculture, did that with Grand Farm a couple of months ago. And I think that was really useful, kind of teaching people how to be nefarious, because most of us don't go about our day thinking about, how do I be a bad guy? How do I steal people's information? So I think forcing them to sit in that role and actually do a red team exercise and play the role of the bad guy, I think helps them think like that sometimes. I'll say, I think this is going to be a huge issue for the ag sector. And part of that is that it was actually something that FBI warned about recently, the risk of timed attacks on our agriculture sector and food supply chain. And I think it's specifically because if you think about agriculture, right, it's a very time sensitive industry where you've got your planting cycle and your harvest cycle. And so that's a pretty narrow window to hold someone hostage. And if it takes 3 weeks to get them outside of this, get them pulled out of the system, repair everything, you might be out of luck, right? That could be all your farming revenue for the entire year. So I think we're probably going to see more and more of this in the ag sector specifically.
A couple of things. On the industrial side, we've observed that there's only 3 ways that ransomware shuts down or damages physical operations. And the ag sector is one I'm not that familiar with. So maybe set that to the side. But, I'm familiar with heavy industry, steel mills, power plants, rail switching systems. We've only observed 3 ways. One is the ransomware targets the OT system directly. Happened to, I think, Honda a couple of times. The nasty got into their production systems and shut them down, and they lost days of production. What can you do about that? You can put mechanisms in place to prevent the propagation of malware into those sensitive networks, and that's part of my topic this afternoon. The second way is what's called abundance of caution shutdowns. This was the Colonial Pipeline scenario. Ransomware got into IT, but they shut the pipeline down anyway because it was a safety critical process. And bluntly, they weren't confident of the strength of their OT security predictions. And so they weren't comfortable continuing to run a dangerous physical process when the threat was on their doorstep. And, again, the answer there is increase the strength of your protections to prevent the propagation of malware so that you can be confident continuing. Some, improved detection and scanning ability would help as well, so that if you have pulled the plug on your OT network, you can scan it and be confident of bringing it up, once you've eliminated all connections to the outside world. But the third way is, in a sense, and neither of these are surprising. The third way is new and was surprising to a lot of people. And it's emerged as a significant factor in ransomware shutting down physical operations. It's dependencies. The textbook example is, look, if I am producing whatever it is, iPhones, I don't care. If I'm producing consumer goods, toasters, I produce them by the pallet load. Okay. A pallet load of toasters shows up every 90 seconds and has to be taken into the warehouse. If the printer printing the label for the pallet is on the IT network and is crippled by the ransomware attack, I have to shut my plant down. I can't produce toasters anymore, because if I send pallet of toasters into the warehouse without proper labeling, I will never, literally never find it again. And so these dependencies, how do you deal with that? You have to analyze your dependency. You have to do the work. You have to manage those dependencies. Again, some ideas this afternoon, but when you have dependencies, you don't just have a safety critical industrial process and a business critical business process. You generally also have a reliability critical set of components in the business network that can affect the reliability of your physical operations. Long answer. I forgot the question.
Yeah, one of my biggest takes, especially around ransomware, is this, and I think it's kind of been said when we talked about the backups, but for the most part, the question is, does it really matter when it comes to the data, right? Because does it matter what's corrupting that data, where your data loss is coming from, if you can recover from it? So having that in place is paramount to making sure that ransomware isn't going to turn and cripple you. Now, safety systems is obviously a whole different thing where it's shut it down. One thing to deal with in incident response more specifically is sometimes it's not best to shut it down. If it's a safety thing, absolutely. The one time we spent actually dealing with a ransomware event in our incident response, everybody's like, stop it. It's like, no, right now we can start to see where things are coming from. We got a good backup. Let this thing roll. And allowing it to do so, we were actually able to get it quicker because we were able to find the source and deal with it. So it's just this interesting dynamic that everything's a little bit different. Now, if it was going to affect safety, human life, absolutely. In some cases, when you're under attack like that, you don't want to. But again, the ransomware piece, just make sure your backup's solid. That will take care of 90% of it. There was a discussion a little bit earlier when they were talking about the controls and the 5 to use and the CIS. I think they're down to what, 18 now? It used to be the CIS 20. But what's interesting about those controls, and those controls are just the activities that you do to protect your network, your data, your information, is, I believe the first 8 of those were what we called cyber hygiene. And it comes back to that thing, making sure that you're clean. And that takes care of 90% of your risk, just those 8 things out of 20, because it is your backups, it is your vulnerabilities, it's making sure that you are just taking care of what you have. So focusing on cyber hygiene, and again, coming back around full circle to the awareness side of things is, we still have to deal with the users, and that's usually where that's going to turn around and come into the system. Having that culture, having them informed and looking out for those things is really, really important. But I've seen, and I think we've said, how do we handle those users? Some of us just don't like users sometimes, don't take it personal. They just make our job a little bit more difficult sometimes. But I've been with executives and they're like, well, if they fail your phishing test 3 times, fire them. They're gone. Get them out of here. Well, is that 3 times in a month? Is it 3 times in a year, 2 years? What do you want to do? And is that really how you want to go about it? The idea is, at the end of the day, we want people to be successful, right? We don't want them clicking on things, but we've invested time and effort. So it needs to be us as a group working hand in hand for the users to be successful. But again, it might come to that point where it's like, okay, this is the 12th month in a row since you've been here and you've clicked every single month on these things. Maybe you should go. But again, at the end of the day, we just want to be successful. We want our users to not bring this stuff into our network, and we want to make sure that we have good cyber hygiene and backups.
Thank you.
If I might add just one more thing, nobody mentioned theft of data. Modern ransomware steals your data and holds it for ransom, saying, pay us or we're going to, put it out on the internet, in addition to encrypting everything in sight and, rendering it inoperable. And what can you do about that? I was impressed by the gentleman put up the tiered architecture, saying, look, your crown jewels are, the most thoroughly protected, whereas your workstations that are sort of have indiscriminate access to the internet are the ones that are the most vulnerable. Put a couple of layers of protection between your most vulnerable systems and your most valuable systems.
Yeah,
And
I was just going to say one thing that we need to start thinking about as well is that we talk about all the time when it comes to ransomware, don't let the users or teach them not to click on anything. The case that just took place in Vegas with MGM, that was done over a phone call that the attackers got in, socially engineered, and then ransomware. And by the way, kudos to MGM for not paying the ransom. If we want it to go away, the reason why I won the lottery in Australia, email scam works all the time, is because people still fall for it. If we stop paying the ransom, sometimes that's hard to do, especially in a medical or a health or a life issue. If we can stop paying it, it'll force them to go away from that.
I think there's also some potential for automation on this too, and automated system monitoring from like an AI or ML perspective. And I think part of that, if you look at what Andrew was mentioning there about data exfiltration as well as encryption, getting a baseline level of, what does it look like for a normal user on a daily basis, right? If Andrew encrypts one file a day and just sent a command to encrypt 500 files in the last 2 seconds, that might not be normal, right? Or if he has, a gigabyte going out a day and all of a sudden is trying to send 100 gigabytes of data today, maybe we should do something with permissions.
Cool. I'm going to turn to audience now to see if we want to ask questions so that we can have more interaction. So let's see.
Thank you. Yeah. As we are moving towards more AI, ML, and we are having more AI, ML tools being innovated each and every day. So what do you think that, or how different does a cybersecurity professional job responsibility looks like 5 years from now? And what are the companies doing to create that AI security awareness?
Yeah, that's the big one that's happening right now in our industry. And the only thing that one of the things I want to get across is that we always look at, I was at Black Hat during, we call it summer camp in Vegas, because we have Black Hat, DEF CON back to back. But the big push from some of the software vendors was, look, we have AI that's going to help you. We have AI that's going to help you. But just as it was been mentioned, hackers are going to use AI as well. So eventually it's going to be down to this whole AI, whose AI is better, right? The thing that scares me the most isn't necessarily data, it is freedom. And let me tell you why. Especially when it comes to things like deep fakes. They are predicting like within a year, we won't be able to tell the difference anymore. And what concerns me is 5 years ago, if I would have said, hey, is it okay if whatever government or whatever, whoever tracks you 24/7, we would all be up in arms going, no way, no way. I think we're going to eventually get to the point where we're like, yeah, I would like the government to track me so that they can prove that wasn't going into the library at that particular day. And that's actually what scared me more than anything else at this point.
Next question.
Sorry, I didn't take that from you guys.
Yeah, I guess I'll add on to that too. I think one thing that you might find that's very different 5 years from now is the cybersecurity professional. You might be working in an industry that you never thought you would work in. So I mentioned agriculture. I think that's a very real one, but I think there are going to be whole sectors that, like you were saying, say, oh, shoot, we need to care about cyber. We never had to care about that for the last 100 years of our existence. And a lot of them are going to be looking to outsource that, don't necessarily want to become cybersecurity companies internally. And they told us that directly when we met with them. They said, we'd much rather find someone else on the outside that can just take care of this problem for us. So I think at the same time, what that means, though, is that if you find those sectors and you end up, doing a double major in cybersecurity, but also something ag related, you could end up extremely valuable very quickly.
Testing. let me add on the industrial side, 5 years now, what I very much hope to see, and there are clear indications this is coming about, so cross my fingers, is I need to find the right adjective. Let's say more effective collaboration between engineering teams who are responsible for safety and preventing equipment damage and the physical operation. More effective cooperation between engineering teams and enterprise security teams. In the past, that collaboration looked a lot like, either enterprise security saying you have to do security and the engineering teams rebelling because of a lack of awareness, lack of understanding of cyber risk. Or increasingly, the engineering teams going to the enterprise security team hat in hand saying, please, sir, can I have some security? And having stuff dropped in their hat and looking at their hat going, ew, that's horrible. Neither of those were effective collaboration models. I'm going to be talking about a different model later on, but just, I want to Google it in the meantime. I'm talking about an initiative called Cyber Informed Engineering that sees managing cyber risk to physical operations as a coin with two sides. One side is teach the engineers about cyber risk. Been singing that song for 20 years. The other side of the coin is using powerful engineering tools like safety engineering to change the design of the physical process so that cyber risk is eliminated. Using mechanical mechanisms to assure safety as opposed to merely or in addition to cyber mechanisms.
Thank you. I think, can we take a couple of questions together? Sorry, go ahead.
You can go ahead. I was just going to add real quick to this. I think, real quick, the deepfake thing, especially as a parent, scares me because now I think there's potential there for human trafficking and things like that, where you're going to see the automation of finding ways to pull kids out of their homes. And that really is something that we just have to press on. But the other thing I was going to say, talking about how AI is going to change so many things, it already is. And especially if you're talking healthcare, and I actually saw on one of the posters there something that reinforces it. But when it came to AI and computers, we used, there's this concept, the imitation game, the Turing test, right? You don't know that you're talking to a computer. And the thing is we've actually blown by that. And historically, somebody would always say, hey, what's the next thing? What's after that? And once you pass that test, what is that next improvement? And we've actually blown by that already today. Journal of American Medicine just came out and they did a test and a survey, and 80% of the people surveyed preferred the bedside manner of AI over their doctors. And what it was, I think the poster right over here was the same thing. Oh, it was the Python teaching one, right? They almost prefer to learn from AI because at the end of the day, we're all people. And if we're the nicest of people, we can still be jerks or we can still have these human interactions. And it just kind of drops that. So I would always say that next thing was not only do you not know you're talking to a computer, but you would prefer to talk to, would have been that next step. We're already past that today. And the other thing is keeping in mind AI is in places that we never suspected. My wife works in an ER and she needed a new stethoscope. And she ordered it, and it's tied to her phone. It's got AI. It's got a display on it. It can check your heartbeat, but the AI kicks back and it'll tell her if this person is AFib or not. I mean, coming in and saying, hey, who's diagnosing you? Now we've got AI on the back end on a stethoscope is in 5 years, we just don't know.
Thank you. I think we're going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to collect multiple questions so that the panel members can choose who wants to respond to those questions. That way we can get more question and answer. So could we hear a couple of questions?
My question was, while cyber threats are rising, what would you say is probably one of the most common and most dangerous cyber threat currently?
Make it another one.
Nowadays, malware is less going after the end users and more for the big corporations getting their data. How would one avoid getting their information taken from a large corporation where like data leaks happen?
Who wants to take that any of those questions? Andrew.
I can start with at least like the data like sharing. Basically just review what they share. Like as you're trying to access different things, like what are they going to do with it? I mean, I think all of us would probably agree that you look at all your social medias, your X, Facebook, Instagram, they're right on there with TikTok, with how much information that they're taking from you, what you're sharing with them. But then the biggest difference between the majority of them and TikTok, the Chinese government has access to it. So when you look at that, how much are you actually sharing with individuals? Probably the most common, I'm trying to also think what the common one, at least just to kind of keep the focus on like what you could be dealing in your personal lives. At least what I tend to hear is like with the phishing emails where people are trying to get you to share more information.
To answer the first question in terms of the biggest risk, it's not my specialty, but what I worry the most about is nation state threats to society. And the nation, nations with large investments in this space, China, Russia, to an extent Iran, they have tens of thousands of fake personas on social media and other places. And the job of those fake personas is to stir the pot and make people angry and stop them from cooperating with each other, influence elections. This is happening every day. I don't know what to, anything to do about it. Again, not something I understand. It's something I worry about. So that's part of the answer. To give the answer in terms of the space that I study, the new pervasive threat is nation state grade ransomware. Some of the ransomware groups out there are backed by nation states, North Korea specifically. This is how the North Korean regime produces foreign currency under sanction. And some of the ransomware groups outside of the North Korean influenced ones are wealthy enough to be able to buy nation state grade attack tools and capabilities. This is the new pervasive threat. It's not that every one of us is going to be targeted by one of these, but these threats are out there and you don't know, the big industries, a steel mill, a power plant, don't know when the ransomware group coming after them next is going to have nation state capabilities.
So to add on to that one, I would say same concern, but specifically healthcare sector. And I think that one where, similar to the AI stethoscope, there are a lot of medical devices and medical IoT hardware coming out at the moment that definitely is kind of outpacing the security for those systems. So there have been a couple high profile recalls there. If you look at Medtronic and what happened with, it was Bluetooth enabled pacemakers and Bluetooth enabled insulin pumps. And they released them and then they said, whoops, turns out it's really easy to murder someone like that. We need to recall all of these right away. There have been anecdotal cases of people getting called in for a second surgery and told, we left the deep password on your pacemaker and someone could kill you right now and we need to change that password. It's things like that I think are going to become a big issue in the healthcare sector specifically.
In the interest of time, we can take the last couple of questions. Let's see if anybody wants to take this opportunity.
So we're all high schoolers at this table. So we're going to be the next generation of the cybersecurity workforce. So what do you want from us? Like, what can we give you?
Save us, please.
I'll answer with an open mind and thirst to learn. That's going to be the biggest thing that's going to come in as you start in your profession.
Yeah, I'd definitely second that. It is, learn to watch and figure new things out, right? By the time you're done, by the time you hit, schools, you're not going to have a clue what's going to be needed of you, right? So being able to adapt is going to be huge. In HR, when we try and hire people, it's always a tricky thing. You really never know. So most places will take, and it's an old HR saying, but you're going to hire somebody for what they know, right? You're going to have a resume, you're going to have an interview, and you're going to convince somebody that you know exactly all this stuff, which is great. And when it comes time that you're the kind of person that gets fired, they fire you because of who you are, that you're not, having that growth mindset. And that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, keep that in mind, keep that word, because it looks through that growth mindset. learn and just have a thirst for learning.
With that, I think let's conclude the panel. Thank you so much for their time, and let's give a big applause for their time. And I have a plaque to away for each one of you. I think I gave already to Dale, but I think we have to give your plaques. So Prashant, where are you? Do we have the plaques? We'll send you all the pictures. You know, it's a great questions. I appreciate high schoolers for asking very cool questions. You know, thank you so much. Do you want? Maybe we should give. Or Uraya. Yeah. We'll start with Uraya.
Right.
Here's your.
All right. Already got mine.
Thank you. It's great. Chad. Pictures or what is the bag? Bag's okay. Thank you. You want to take the next one?
Andrew?
Andrew? I need to give, that's the last one. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it. Yeah, back. And then I have one for Hassan. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Hassan, here's yours. Thank you.
Thanks.